So if you've just purchased the DJI Osmo 360 and you want to know how to get the most out of this camera, you're in the right place. By the end of this video, you'll know everything you need to know in order to capture and create the best footage with this camera. In this video, I'm going to unbox this camera. I'm going to show you how to set it up. I'm going to share the best settings for every mode, provide you with some powerful tips and tricks, and finally, show you how to edit this footage that you capture using the DJI Mobile and DJI Studio app. And I've created a table of contents with chapters below so that you can easily navigate through this video. Let's get started. So first of all, inside the box, we've got the star of the show inside here. This is the actual camera. I'm gonna open that up in a moment. And we've got a manual in here, as well as a QR code to get you to the DJI forum. And we've also got some DJI stickers in here. Inside this cardboard here, we've got what looks like a lens cap. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And then we also have the battery in here. Now, if you already own a camera like the DJI Osmo Action 4 or 5, this battery is very similar to those batteries, and these batteries are cross-compatible. So that is a really nice thing about these cameras. So inside this little pouch here is the actual DJI Osmo 360. And this is the size of it there. It fits in the palm of the hand. It's a fairly tiny camera. And this is what it looks like when we unbox it here. Open this up just to confirm what's inside. Yes, this is the lens cover right here. And then inside there we have the charging cable. And it's worth noting this cable is USB-C to USB-C. This cable does feel very heavy duty. And then this has a nice silicone feel to it. This is meant to protect those lenses when you're not using the camera. And then finally, I'm going to take the battery out here. And by the way, this is the standard bundle. So the standard bundle simply includes everything that I've gone through here. If you get one of the many other bundles that DJI has, you will have more than this standard bundle included. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to charge up this camera, and then we're going to power it on, and we're going to get into setting up this camera for the first time. So before I power on the Osmo 360, I'd like to give a quick tour of this camera, so that you can know what all of these buttons and ports and doors and different features are on the outside of the camera. So first of all, right up here on the top, this dot right here and this dot right here, these are microphones. And then of course we have one of the lenses here. And then when we rotate it around, we've got the other lens right here. Each of these captures a little bit beyond 180 degrees of footage. That way when they're stitched together, you get that full 360 without any interruption. And this of course right here is the touchscreen. And down here at the bottom, we have the shutter record button. That's the circular button right here. Over here, this square button is the function button. And then if we go to this side of the camera right here, this door right here, to open it, there's an arrow that points this way. So we're just gonna slide this and pull down at the same time. And this is going to be where you can connect the USB-C. So this is gonna be if you wanna charge the battery in the camera, or if you want to connect it to your computer or other device to get files off here. And then if we close this, when you close it, you just want to make sure all the red disappears. That means it is waterproof on the inside, that water's not going to get in as long as you have that door closed. And of course, as long as you don't go below the depth that this camera can go, which I believe this camera can go down to 10 meters safely and still be waterproof. This right here is the speaker. So if you listen to any of your files on this camera, this is where the sound's going to come out. And then of course, this button right here is the power button. And then if we go over to this side, this also is a microphone right here, down below the DJI logo. And this is the status LED light right here. So for this one, the arrow points this way. So we're going to point it that way, and we're going to slide down at the same time. Then we're going to pop it up. And this, of course, is where the battery goes in. So the battery, when you insert it, you just want to make sure this part with the connectors right here, this needs to go on the upper side. So it's going to go in just like this, and you're going to push it down in. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, this does take the same exact battery as the Osmo Action 5 Pro. And the nice thing is I own the Osmo Action 5 Pro, so I've actually got an extra battery already right here. So that is a cool thing about this. I'm glad DJI did that. It's not a proprietary, unique battery to this camera. And then of course, same thing with this door. When we close it, you want to make sure none of this red is showing. There's red here and red here when it's open. So when you pop it back into place, everything goes smoothly there and there's no red showing at that point. And let's take a look down on the bottom here. So these are the magnetic quick release slots. And with the standard bundle that I bought, the magnetic quick release does not come with this, but you do get the 1/4 inch 20 mount right here in the middle. And that's going to be what I primarily use anyway, because I have a selfie stick that I'm going to use with this here. And I'm just going to twist it on there. But you can pretty much use any selfie stick. You do not have to buy the one from DJI. So I already have a lot of selfie sticks that have that 1/4" 20 mount on there. As long as a selfie stick can stay straight so that the software can make the selfie stick invisible and not show it in your frame, that's all you need. So you don't have to go out and buy the DJI selfie stick. Pretty much any selfie stick that can stay straight will work with this. And then these 4 little contacts you see around the 1/4" 20 mount, these are charging contacts. If you use the optional DJI charger for this, that also did not come with this kit, but if you use that, that is where you would connect it. All right, so we're gonna do the first power up. So I'm going to rotate this around here, and I'm going to power it on. I'm gonna set my language as English here. And something important to note, you do need to have the DJI Mimo app installed in order to do the full setup on this camera. If you don't have it installed, you can skip 5 times, but after you skip that 5 times, you do have to authenticate it with the DJI Mimo app. I know this is something that a lot of you do not like, and it is unfortunate that you have to have an app to run it, but that is how a lot of companies do things these days. So do make sure you have the DJI Mimo app installed. I'm going to bring that up on my phone, and I'm going to show you what it looks like on my phone as well, so that you can see that part of the process too. So once we have the DJI Mimo app up here, it's going to detect our camera, and we're going to click connect. And then we're just going to make sure the codes match. So the code does match. I'm going to click accept on my camera, and then it's going to continue connecting on the phone. It's going to give you the DJI product terms of use. I'm going to click agree. I'm going to select activate Osmo 360, and I'm going to confirm my account info, and I'm going to click activate. So it's going to go through the activation process. So I'm going to click confirm here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the date and time on the camera, and we're going to click get started on the app. It's going to show you a few different things. I'm just going to skip through those. And then it's going to start downloading the firmware. So it is really important. You basically have to do this initial firmware update or your camera is not going to work. And by the way, on the screen, it's giving us a tour of all of the different things I just talked about and showed you. So I'm going to skip through those and I'm going to click done. So at this point, it is going to continue downloading the firmware on my phone. So I'm just going to set my phone here and let that finish. It is 712 megabytes, which is a pretty sizable firmware update. We're going to now click install on our phone, and it may prompt you to reconnect. So I'm going to click connect here, and then it's going to push the firmware that it just downloaded to the camera. And the second part of the process is going to be much faster. So you're going to then see this status on your Osmo 360 camera. And as you can see on the phone here off to the side, it's ticking up very quickly for the installation part of the process here. And it does give an ETA of about 2 minutes. And usually DJI ETAs are pretty accurate, at least when it comes to firmware updates. And then it's going to say update success. I'm going to click done on the app. All right, so I am back outside now and it's a beautiful day out. So I'm going to start off by going through what each of the icons mean in the live view screen on the Osmo 360. And then I'm going to go through the main menu settings because there are some very important ones in there you don't want to miss setting. And then finally, I'm going to go through the best settings for each mode, and I'm going to explain briefly with each setting why this is a setting you want to select for the best footage. So let's get into it. So first, as far as the main live view screen elements go, up here in the upper left, this is how much time you have left for recording, depending on the mode and the storage. So right now it shows 1 hour and 41 minutes, but that is using the internal storage, which the Osmo 360 does have internal storage, which is great. It's technically 120 gigabytes of internal storage, but once you include the operating system running on here, the firmware, all of that, you get 105 gigabytes of usable storage. So if you happen to forget a micro SD card, you can store quite a bit on there. In the default 8K 30 mode here, you can get about 1.5 hours of footage. So I really like it that DJI made the choice to build that in. And then if you want to do any playback, you're going to hit this play button right here. And of course, right now there's no files on there. I don't have any on there at the moment, but that is where you would be able to toggle them and play them back. And then the shooting mode icon is down here. Right now you see the globe for the panoramic video mode. But when you click on this, this is where you can scroll through the different modes, which we're going to get into all of these in a moment here. And we're going to talk about the best settings. And then down here in the bottom center, these are the shooting specifications. So right there where it says 8K 30, you click on it, and this is where you're going to be able to choose your resolution, frame rate, and a couple other settings, which we'll also get into in a moment. And then in the top right, this is your battery level. So right now it shows 93% remaining. I like it that you can see the number there. Makes it really easy to keep track of how much battery you have left. And then if you want to view the lens or switch, that's gonna be this button right down here. So you can toggle it and switch it. It's gonna show me there when we switch it toward the camera, and then we can switch it back and it's gonna show that nice forest landscape in front of us. So I'm going to keep it on that because I feel like that's a much more interesting landscape to look at as we go through these settings. And then finally, the image audio parameters are going to be if you click right here on this icon. Spoiler alert, we're gonna make sure it's on Pro in a moment, but I'm just gonna change it now to Pro while we're here. When you click Pro, you're gonna unlock a bunch of settings in here, which we'll go through in a moment. And then this is gonna be the audio icon here as well, which we'll also explore in a moment. And then of course, as you might have noticed when we clicked on this, there are two different modes. There's a 360 mode and there's a single lens mode. So basically, most or all of the modes on here allow you to capture footage in either 360 or the single lens. So in a way, you kind of have that traditional action camera built into here, which is very cool. You don't have to capture 360 footage. You can do the single lens as well. So this is where you would change that. It's gonna be right up here at the top when you click that shooting mode button in the bottom left. And then of course, if you want to get to the main menu and all the settings, you're going to swipe down once from the top. And this is where we're gonna toggle in a bunch of those settings in a moment here. And then if you want to change your viewing angle, you can just click and hold in the center here. And you can look in any direction. So you can even look up if you want. You can basically go all the way around and get it framed exactly as you want to. And then if you want to go back to the default at all, just click this and it's going to take you back to a centered view of this lens or the lens on the other side. And then of course this power button on the side over here that we talked about earlier, this also functions as a quick switch if your camera's already clicked on.
Panoramic Photo.
And that's going to be once you've set up the quick switch menu. You're gonna be able to toggle through those here, which we'll talk about that in a moment as well. And then this square button down here, when powered on, you can switch between the front and the rear 360 view. So you push it once, it's gonna switch the lens, push it again, it's gonna switch that way. And then if you double press it, if you're in 360 mode, it's going to recenter the view. So let's toggle up here, then I'm gonna double click and it's gonna recenter it. So just a couple tips there that can really help you get the most out of that button. All right, so let's get to some really important settings here. I'm gonna toggle down. We're gonna get to the main menu. So some of these settings, these are gonna be really preferential based, but this first one, if you wanna save a preset, you can do that. And then when you click here, it's gonna show all the parameters. So if you get a very specific setup that you want to save, so you have a custom quick switch, you're gonna do that right here. And then this right here, this with the quick switch, this enables the voice prompt, so if you want it to tell you what mode you're toggling between, you can have it tell you that, or you can turn it off if you want to. And then you can enable modes here to be part of the quick switch. So I recommend having a couple of these available, basically the ones you're going to use most. So in my case, I'm gonna have the Panoramic Photo, Panoramic Video, and SuperNight modes here. And then I'm also gonna use the Hyperlapse pretty often and the Timelapse. So those are the ones I'm gonna make part of that. But you can also do that for single lens too. So if there's any single lens modes you're gonna use often, you can make all of those available as well. And then over here on the mic button, this is gonna be if you have any of the DJI wireless mics that you wanna pair with this camera. This is gonna be where you can see the info on those, and you can pair up to 2 of them. So you could have 2 different people talking and their audio can be feeding into the same video file, which is very cool. So do keep that in mind. If you have the DJI wireless mic, you can pair that and use that on here. Now this next button right here, this cog, this is gonna actually show us quite a few of the settings that we wanna set up on here. So snapshot mode is basically this button right here. Instead of powering the camera on with the button on the side here, you can power it on with this, and it's going to take you to a specific mode and it's going to automatically start recording. So what I like to keep this as is I like to keep this as the last panoramic mode. So whichever mode I use last, whether it be video, photo, hyperlapse, time lapse, I want that to be what starts when I do that. But one of the best options can be to select panoramic video here if you're going to use that most often and you want that as your default. That's usually a popular choice as well. But you can choose from a bunch of other settings down here if you want to. And then if you want the screen to turn off while recording, the default is 1 minute. So your screen is going to go dark. I know that can sometimes be alarming because some people may think that it stopped recording and you might not want it to turn off, but it does save battery power because this display does use quite a bit of battery power. But what I like to do with this is I like it to go off after 5 minutes. Rarely am I going to be recording a single continuous clip for more than 5 minutes, but often I'm going to be recording one for more than 1 minute. So I like to set it to 5, but you can go all the way down to never. If you never want it to go off when you're recording, just select never, and it won't ever go off while you're recording, unless of course your battery runs out, and then the whole thing's going off. And then down here, related to that, the auto power off setting. So this is going to be how long it takes for your camera to power off if you're not doing anything with it. So if you don't touch it and you're not recording with it, this is how long it's going to power off if it's powered on. I like to do 2 minutes there personally, but again, you have a bunch of options, and you can also select never all the way down at the bottom. And then the always on display, I like to keep that selected. I like the display to always be on. And then the LED, I like the LED, so I'm going to keep those on. A very important setting here is bitrate. So by default, this starts at standard, and you do not want the standard bitrate, especially with 360 footage. You want to get the highest quality footage, and you really want to have the high right here. I believe the bitrate on here is about 170 megabits per second, and you definitely want that for 360 footage. If you use standard, a common thing you're going to notice is your footage is going to look blocky, and it's going to look lower quality, and it's just not going to look as good. So definitely do the high bitrate there. For the USB mode, this is more of an informational thing. So if you click on it, it's just going to tell you to use Type-C to C PD to connect the camera to an Android device, a PC, or a Mac. And then built-in mic audio backup. If you are using a wireless mic, I do recommend turning this on. That's going to help ensure that you always have usable audio if something happens to go wrong between the connection of your mic to the camera, and for some reason it doesn't record the audio on here. You're gonna have that built-in backup. Then if you have any of the remote controls for this camera, the Bluetooth remote controller section is gonna be where you can connect it, and also where you can change some settings, such as setting that remote to wake up the camera. And then the wireless connection, from time to time, if your phone is not pairing to your camera, what you can do is you can toggle this off and back on again. And sometimes what you'll have to do is you'll have to go down here and reset the connection as well. So if you do have any problems, a helpful tip is go here and reset that, and it's probably going to fix that pairing. And then down here for the naming management, this is up to you. You can do a whole bunch of customization here. I honestly usually just leave this at the default. I'm good with default naming convention, but if you're not, you can adjust those settings here, and you have a lot of options there. Horizon calibration, I recommend doing this the first time before using this camera. And typically what I will do is I will just set this on a desk, something flat. Just make sure you don't move the surface while you have it doing this, and then click confirm. And it's gonna tell you don't touch the camera, keep it on a flat surface. Usually it takes a couple seconds here, and then it's gonna tell you it's complete. But I do recommend doing that every once in a while. And especially if you notice anything looking kind of weird in your footage with the horizon, I recommend doing that just to make sure you get a clean read of that. For the language, you can change your language here. I have it at English. Date and time, if you need to do any adjustments to that, this is where you can change that. And then factory reset, if you ever have any weird issues going on with your camera, sometimes a good first step, if you've already done other things, is just click the factory reset and let it do a reset. It is going to wipe out all your settings, but if that fixes it, it can be better than sending it off to DJI support. And then device info down here, it's going to give you the device name, the serial number, the firmware version, the camera firmware version, the quick start guide if you want to ever preview that again to see what everything means on there, you can do that. And then there's the export log down here. In general, you should not have to go to that one unless you need to check your firmware version, or unless for some reason you need to work with DJI on a support case on your camera. And then compliance info is down here. So then this mode right here, if you have this enabled, that's going to be orientation lock. I like to keep orientation lock on. I find that makes it easiest for me to follow what's going on with the camera and what I'm recording. And then if you're using this camera underwater, I recommend locking the screen, and then you swipe up to unlock when you need to unlock it. Generally, it's a good idea to do that underwater. Otherwise, the water is going to be pushing on the touchscreen, and it could start pushing things on there that you don't want the water to push. And then this button right here is the editing assistant. And what it does is it tells you here, when enabled, tap once in the Mimo app to lock the focus on the subject and quickly compose a shot, but power consumption will be increased, leading to shortened battery life. So I don't use this. I'm just gonna hit OK, and I'm gonna disable it. I'm just going to edit my footage later on when I'm done recording. And then this right here is gesture control. So if you enable this, you can raise your hand and open your palm and it's going to start recording. And it shows you the gesture right here, which is pretty cool. But you do have to be within a 2-meter range. And of course, if you raise it a second time, it's going to stop the recording. And then if you toggle left, there are more settings. So lens protection mode is just gonna be if you have the lens protectors from DJI on here. I do not, so I'm gonna keep that at none. This is gonna be voice controls. So if you wanna enable that and you wanna use voice commands to start and stop this, you can do that. You just wanna make sure to set your language. And then these are the commands you can use: start recording, stop recording, take photo. And of course, as you can see, it worked right there, stop recording. So yeah, it works. But yes, there are a couple other commands there that you could use. And then this one right here is timer shooting. So you can actually schedule a time for this to turn on and start recording. So there could be some use cases. I personally don't use this, but you may have a use case where that's handy. So this is where you find that setting if you need it. This over here is the grid, and I like to have the grid enabled. I like to really get my shots set up well with that rule of thirds where you have your eyes of your subject along that top line. Now, of course, it is 360 footage, so you can reframe it later on, but I like to at least give it the best chance to look the best later on when reframing by ideally capturing it as best as possible when I'm capturing. And then this is gonna be if you're connecting wireless earbuds. That's where you're gonna click there to connect them. This is your screen brightness. I usually just stick with the default here. I find that works well. It's the best balance of brightness and with the battery power. All right, so this right here, when you click on this, this shows the storage and the internal. There it is at the 105.5 gigabytes. And then I have put in a 256 micro SD card. So I'm going to switch the storage to that because it is bigger. But as you can see, I already have files on there. So when you do want to reformat your storage, if you go over here and click on storage, you can select which one to reformat. But do note, before you do this, it is going to delete all of the files that you have on that storage method. So be very careful when selecting this. Make sure you select what you intend to. So for the internal storage, I'm gonna give that a swipe here. I'm gonna format it. And then for the SD card, I'm gonna do the same. If you're putting a new SD card in this camera for the first time, I highly recommend formatting it first before you start to use it. It's just gonna make sure it's set up and fully compatible with this and it's not gonna give you any problems. And by the way, the card I'm using in here, I'm using the SanDisk Extreme Pro. That does have fast enough read and write speeds. And I'm using a 256 like I mentioned. I find that to be plenty big. It'll get me about 3 hours of footage, maybe a little bit more at 8K. So that is plenty large for this camera. And then over here is the sound. So the sounds I find high is a little bit loud on here, so I like to do medium. I find that DJI medium is just right. Sometimes I'll even do low, but I don't usually have it off because I like at least some sound just to make sure that I have that audio feedback when I start or stop a recording or when I change a mode. So those are all of the main menu settings. We've got them all keyed in and we're good there. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna go down here and we're gonna start setting the parameters in the various modes. So I'm gonna click here and I'm gonna make sure we're in panoramic video. And I'm going to click down here at the bottom. So in almost all cases, I recommend filming in 8K. And then for your frames per second, this is totally up to you. If you want that more cinematic frames per second, you wanna use 24. If you want that frames per second that's akin to a TV show, you wanna use 30. And then of course, depending on what country you live in, you can go all the way up to 50 in 8K, which is pretty cool. But if you do want to do any type of slow motion, go over here to 6K and you can go up to 6K 60. And then if you want really slow-mo, you can go over here to 4K and you can get up to 100 frames per second. We're gonna talk about slow-mo a little bit more as well. But generally, if I want that little bit of slow-mo where I wanna slow it down about 50% or 2 times, I'm gonna do 6K 60. Because that's going to get me the highest quality footage while still giving a little bit of an opportunity to slow it down. My default mode is 8K 30. And for the lens setting up here, you can actually adjust this. Later on when you're framing this, it really doesn't matter so much what setting you select there. It's only going to really matter on the single lens mode. But usually I like to set that to wide or ultra wide because I do like being able to see that framing there. And then of course up here for the mode, there are a couple different video modes. That pre-record is going to be recording your footage before you press record. So it could be good for like if you're fishing or if you're at an athletic event and you want your camera recording at all times without actually writing to your footage. What you do is you hit record and it's going to automatically grab the last 30 seconds when it starts that. So it's a good option for that if you don't want to have it recording all the time, but you want to make sure you don't miss any highlights. And then the loop recording is somewhat similar. If you go to the loop recording, what this does is this overwrites old footage automatically. So that's if you're doing like continuous monitoring. You can do various intervals from 5 up to 5 minutes all the way up to 1 hour, or you can do max. And then it tells you down here, only save videos 5 minutes before end of recording. So what it's going to do is once you cut it off, it's going to save whatever you had for the last 5 minutes. It's going to continuously overwrite. I don't find myself really using these modes just because of the nature of what I record with this camera, but it is good for you to know they're there in case you have a use case where you might want to use those. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna toggle back down and we're gonna get over here into the more advanced settings right here. So like I mentioned earlier, make sure you select Pro. If you don't have Pro selected, you're going to be very limited in what options you have here. But first of all, exposure up here. In a lot of cases, you may be fine with that auto exposure, but there are a couple settings that I recommend changing for daytime recording. So if you click up here where it says shutter speed, I like to set this so that it only goes to a minimum of 1/100 and then all the way up to 1/8000. So the reason for that is if your shutter speed does drop below 1/100, it is going to create ghosting and jitter in your footage because of that electronic image stabilization, and the footage is not going to look great. So I like to do that as a safeguard, just to make sure my shutter speed does not get too slow. But then over here for the ISO for daytime filming, I like to put this to a range of 1 to 1600. I find that that covers me in pretty much all cases, even when I'm in the woods under a heavy canopy of shade. You can see that it's got the ISO at about 795 right there, and that is fine. This camera does have pretty good noise reduction, but of course, if you want to do the manual parameters here, you can toggle that up to M, and you can do all kinds of manual settings here. You can put a static shutter speed, you can adjust the EV value, you can put the ISO to a specific ISO or a range. So there's lots of possibilities there. Typically, I don't do any manual settings like that unless I'm using this mode for filming at nighttime. But if I'm using this at nighttime, I'm going to use SuperNight mode in most cases, which we'll go and look at in a moment. But there is a use case where I might use this if I'm using this camera on a gimbal at nighttime, which I'm not going to get into in this video. I will have a separate video for my best settings for that. And I'll do a comparison of the SuperNight mode so you can see which actually looks better. But do note that you can do that. For white balance, if it's during the daytime, I actually like to set a static value because I want all of my footage to have that same white balance. And what I do for daytime is I do 5600K, and that works great. If you're filming at sunrise or sunset, do 6500K. And if you are filming in low light at nighttime, do either 3200K, like if you're in an urban area, 3200K works great. If you're not, then 4000K can also work great if you want a little bit of a cooler look without it being too blue for your footage. And then this option down here for the anti-motion blur, if you don't want motion blur in your footage, especially in low light where it can cause problems, you can turn this to on, and it's going to help you not get that jitter and ghosting that I mentioned earlier. I, of course, proposed a different method, just keeping your shutter speed range up a little bit higher. But you can use this as well and just keep your shutter auto. That is also an option. But I like to keep this off because it does mention here that if you turn it on, you're going to get darker footage, and that is because it's going to have the shutter speed higher. And then over here, the color mode, this is really important. Now, something incredible about the Osmo 360 is it does have 10-bit footage. So 10-bit offers you 1 billion possible colors versus 8-bit. 8-bit is only 16 million colors, so you get a lot more colors. And it's something where your footage can really look good if you have a lot of the sky in it. You're going to get that nice smooth gradient in the sky. You're not going to get that blocky pattern if you're using 10-bit. So I definitely recommend either using the normal 10-bit if you don't want to do any color grading later on, or using the D-Log-M 10-bit if you want to grade it later on. D-Log-M 10-bit is going to give you that flatter color profile, and it's going to let you do a lot more with that footage to bring out specific colors, contrast, etc. later on. And if you don't want to see the 10-bit flat on your camera like that, you can select on to the color recovery, and it's going to give you an approximate preview of what your footage could look like later on. So I usually like to keep the color recovery on, and that looks really good when I'm filming it. It helps me get a good gauge of how I'm filming, how dark it is, how bright it is, what the colors look like, etc. And the nice thing on this camera is you have to choose, at least in the 8K30, you have to do normal 10-bit or D-Log-M 10-bit. You can't even do 8-bit in this mode, so I like that. And then down here for the endurance mode, if you turn this on, this is going to give you longer battery life, but if you do note that it's going to change your bitrate to standard, and it's going to do a couple other things on here. So really, I don't recommend this. I recommend just having an extra battery or an external power bank with you. I don't recommend sacrificing the quality of your footage to save a little bit of battery power. So I'm going to make sure that is off. And then something really important here for the image adjustment, which I love it that DJI has this because I do not like overly sharp footage. So for texture, if I'm in the woods or a field or something like that, like right here in this setting, I'm going to keep it at -2. I don't want it to over sharpen stuff. It can look really bad, especially when you have a lot of individual leaves and grass. It can kind of give a jarring look to your footage, and that can also help your footage look a little smoother. So I personally do -2, but if you're someplace like say on a lake or on the water or like an open desert area, I do recommend putting this back up to 0, but I don't recommend ever going above 0. Going above 0 is going to give you a lot of texture in your footage, and it's going to have a really over sharpened look, and it does not look good. So I don't recommend ever going above 0. For noise reduction, this is what the DJI is going to do in camera for reducing noise. If you're not going to do any noise reduction later on while editing, which a lot of folks are not going to, I recommend just keeping this at 0. I don't recommend going above that because if you have too much noise reduction applied to your footage, it can actually look quite bad. It can look very smooth and very weird. But if you're filming in good daylight during the daytime and you've got those ISOs that are staying at 800 or below, I'd usually like to do noise reduction at -2. That is going to yield you the best looking footage, and it's going to give you that edge with your footage. It's just going to look extra good. So those are my default settings for the daytime. And then up here for the audio settings, you can adjust the channel to mono or stereo. I actually recommend doing mono. That's going to help prevent it from potentially sounding weird later on in your video. You're going to have that single track video that comes out of both left and right. You're not going to have a separate left and right track. And then for the wind reduction here, I like to set that to smart. I find that smart does a really good job in this camera. If you are using an external mic, of course, this won't apply because you'll set your settings via that external mic. But if you are going to use the audio out of the Osmo 360, I recommend smart. All right, so those are all of those advanced image parameters there. I'm going to save a custom setting here. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to call this my vlog setting. You, of course, can choose a whole bunch of different things. Hiking would also work for me because I'm going to use this camera in most cases while hiking. But I'm going to set this as vlog for my preset. So let's go to the next mode down here. So we're going to go to SuperNight. Let's get our SuperNight mode set up so we're ready to record low light footage with this mode. So first of all, I like to keep this at 8K30, and I like to keep all of the other settings on this screen the same. Then over here for parameters, we can go to exposure. And what I like to do for the SuperNight mode is I like to keep this at auto right here. I like to keep the EV comp at auto as well. And then the shutter speed, I'm also going to keep that at auto. Now this camera is going to do a really good job of getting you the best looking low light footage. And it's going to do that mainly by boosting the ISO and then applying a pretty intense level of noise reduction. So like I mentioned earlier, I will have a video later on where I compare this mode versus using my manual settings, and I'll show you both of those in that. But for the white balance, I do recommend in this one setting it to a static one as well. If you are going to be in an urban area at nighttime, I recommend the 3200K. It's going to help the lights and everything else look natural, and they're going to look good, and it's going to help with some of that potential flicker that you could experience. And then the anti-motion blur, you could turn that on, but the SuperNight mode in general is going to monitor for that, and it's going to help you make sure you don't get that. So I recommend just leaving that off by default. And then the image adjustment down here, you can mess around with this a little bit, but at nighttime, I recommend keeping it at 0 for the texture. It's actually going to help that footage not look too smooth. And then for the noise reduction, I also recommend keeping that at 0. I don't recommend reducing it like we do for the daytime, because your footage is going to look pretty noisy in low light if you do that because of the higher ISO. So I recommend 0 and 0 right there. Going on to our next mode, we're going to talk about selfie mode. So selfie mode is going to be if you're holding this, it's going to keep you in the frame. So of course that's not going to look right here at the moment. But for the selfie mode, it's worth noting you can only go up to 4K resolution, but you can go all the way up to 4K 60. So if you want to do that, I recommend 4K 30, unless you want some slow motion. And then for the parameters over here, I recommend setting the same settings that we did for the general video mode. So I'm going to key those in here. And then for the audio, we just want to make sure our settings are the same there. They are. Vortex mode is going to be if you have the Vortex rotating handle. I do not have that, but if you have that, what you want to do here is you want to set this to 6K. You can technically do 4K at 240, which is really ultra slow-mo, but I find I don't really need it. I find the best results can really be 6K 120. You generally are not going to need something that slow at the expense of the resolution. So I just recommend going for 6K 120 here. And then the other settings over here, again, I won't go through these because these are going to be the same ones I showed in the first, but I recommend the same settings for the daytime footage here. Those are going to get you the best results. Time-lapse mode, all right. So I love time lapses. It's one of my favorite things to do with cameras like this. So what we're gonna do here first is we're gonna click on the 8K 30 and we're gonna make sure it's 8K 30 or 8K 25, depending on where you live. But I'm going to keep it at 8K 30. And you can also do the hyperlapse here. First of all, hyperlapse is basically a motion time lapse. So this is gonna be if you're moving along and you're like walking on a hiking trail like me with these samples. I recommend just keeping this at auto, and I recommend keeping this wide up here. This camera does a great job of figuring out the speed for the hyperlapse. But if you're doing time-lapse mode, when you switch to that, I recommend going over here to custom and then swiping up to set the parameters. If you're doing a time-lapse during the daytime, I recommend 2 seconds to 5 seconds for a time-lapse such as sunset or anything during the day where you're gonna do it for a couple hours. Which if you're gonna go for more than a couple hours, note you will want a power bank attached here because the battery in here is not going to go that long. It's going to last about a couple hours. But then I recommend going to infinity. You can do a timer if you want. If you record for 5 minutes, you're gonna get 2 seconds at a 5-second interval. If you record for an hour, you're gonna get 24 seconds at a 5-second. And if you record for about how long a battery will last, at a 5-second interval, you'll get a video duration of 48 seconds. So I do like it that it shows that video duration because then you can toggle these and you can see how long that end result time lapse will be. So it's a great way to calculate it. You don't have to do math in your head or whip out your calculator. So I do like that, but what I do is I keep this at infinity because I want to start and stop this when I want to in case there's something exciting going on. I don't want to miss it just because I had this on a timer. And then over here for the advanced parameters, what I like to do is I like to go over here. And if you're doing clouds or anything like that, I like to go to that negative 0.3 EV. That's going to help preserve some of the details and the highlights in the clouds. So for time lapses, I like to do that. I find that that's going to give the best results. And then for the ISO, I like to do 100 to 800. I don't want the ISO to be bumping too high and changing drastically on me. So I do like to keep it right there in that range. And then of course, if you did want to set manual parameters here, like a static shutter speed, you could do that. That's going to especially be useful if you're doing any type of night lapse with this, which by the way, if you see here, you can go way down to 30 seconds. So if you are doing a night lapse, here are my recommended settings. Go to 30-second shutter speed. For the ISO, go to a static ISO of 800 and use those two right there. And then for your white balance, you want to go over here to manual and you want to set 3800 for a star lapse at nighttime. And if you're doing a night lapse in a city at nighttime, go down to 3200K. It's gonna look great. And then you wanna go back here to the interval. And if you're doing a 30-second shutter speed, the slowest interval you can do is 40 seconds. So what it means is this is going to take one image every 40 seconds. So that is usually what I use for nighttime star lapses. But if you'd like to have a 30-second interval, one trick you can do here is go back here and under the exposure, you change this to a 25-second shutter speed and then check this. And then when you go back here, you are going to be able to set it to a 30 seconds. So if you want to get more frames in there, I find that the 25-second to 30-second shutter speed doesn't really make a big difference. You'll get a slightly brighter exposure on the 30-second, but the 25 for the trade-off of getting a lot more frames is sometimes a good idea. So you can play around with those, but those are my recommended options for that. All right, so those are all of the settings in the 360 modes, except Panoramic Photo. So for Panoramic Photo, we're gonna go here, and we're going to set our megapixels. Now this camera can take a panoramic photo in 120 megapixels, which is a lot of megapixels. And the nice thing is you can then reframe that later on using the app. And if you want a countdown, you can adjust this all the way up to 10 seconds. So if you need to run and get in the photo with other people, even though it's in 360, if you want to be next to the people in 360 and not have to Photoshop later on, I recommend doing like an interval of 10 seconds here. But if you're just holding this in your hand, snapping a photo, keep the countdown set to off. And if you are doing a photo at nighttime, helpful tip here, go to 30 megapixels. It's going to look smoother and have less noise in it at nighttime. But if you're doing it during the daytime in good lighting, keep it at 120. And then for the other parameters over here, for the exposure, I pretty much recommend keeping this all at auto. And that includes white balance. This camera is going to adjust really well for your photo. So I don't usually change any of those parameters manually. And then if we go up here to single lens mode, if we go to video, you're gonna see here that you can do all the way up to 5K 4:3 or 5K 16:9. So that is very cool. You can actually get a higher resolution than you can get on the Osmo Action 5 Pro, for instance, where you can only go up to 4K. So you can do 5K 16:9 or 5K 4:3. The main advantage with 4:3 in single lens mode is you have a little bit of frame at the top and the bottom where you can adjust your framing later on when editing if you want to. But if you don't ever want to do that, just keep this at 16:9. But I usually like to do 4:3. And the cool thing is you can do 5K 4:3 all the way up to 60 frames per second. And then of course up here, you can do your standard D-warp, you can do your wide, but you cannot do your ultra wide in the 4:3. But if you go back here and you do the 5K 16:9, when you go up here, you can do ultra wide there. So it's up to you with which lens you pick. Each one has pros and cons. I generally just keep it set to wide when I'm in this mode. And then for rock steady, I keep this usually set to just rock steady. And I find that rock steady works really well in this mode. And then our individual parameters here, those are going to be the same as what I showed you for the other mode. So next, if we go to boost video here, boost video is basically an extra wide. I believe it's a 170-degree viewing angle. So it's a very cool mode on here. It kind of gives you that extra view without being in 360. It is still single lens, but you can go all the way up to 4K 120 here. And for that, I do recommend having Rocksteady on, of course. And then for the parameters over here, it's gonna be same thing that I programmed in for the default video menu, so I'm not gonna go through those again here. And then of course you can do a single lens photo as well. So for that, you can go up to 30 megapixels, which I highly recommend doing. You want to get the highest quality you can out of it. And then of course over here, I just recommend keeping this at auto. For the format, I do recommend doing JPEG plus RAW though, because chances are you might want to do some editing to that photo later on. And it's a good idea to have the RAW. It's going to be a lot more flexible for that. But for the exposure and the white balance, I just keep those set at auto. It's going to give you great results. So let's go back to the 360 mode. And I'm gonna go back to my default panoramic video mode. So at this point, those are all of the key settings that you need to know. If you plug in all of those settings as I showed you, you're going to get really good results with this camera. And I think you're going to love the footage. So just a few general tips and tricks. The first one is before you film with this camera, every time, make sure to use the lens wipe and clean off these lenses. With 360 footage, if you get any dust or fingerprints or any type of smudge on there, it's really going to show in your footage, and it can take your great looking footage and quickly ruin it. So make sure to use your lens wipe every time before filming. I'm especially careful of that when I'm in the woods where there's a lot of dust, a lot of spider webs. I've gotten spider webs stuck on my camera lens before, and it's ruined my 360 footage. So just be vigilant of that. That's gonna really help you with that footage to get the best results. And then as I mentioned earlier, if you're gonna put this under the water, just keep in mind the waterproof depth is up to 10 meters, so about 30 feet. And then if you are using it underwater at all, make sure to lock the screen so that the water doesn't push on your screen, and change your settings on you. And for the final part of this video, I'm going to go back to the studio and I'm going to show you how to use the DJI Mimo app and the DJI Studio app on a computer to do your reframes, and I'm going to give you a tour of those apps, and I'm going to show you some basic ways to do edits in there, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to get the best results when reframing your footage later on. So now that you've captured your footage, let's talk about how to edit your footage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to edit your footage first using the DJI Mimo app, and I'm going to demonstrate this on my iPhone. And then next I'm going to show you how to edit your footage on a computer using the DJI Studio app. So what we want to do is we want to open the DJI Mimo app. And then after you've opened your app, what you want to do is you want to make sure you power on the Osmo 360. And once you've powered it on, it's going to detect your camera here. It's going to connect automatically if you've connected it before. And you're going to click join. And then what you want to do is you want to click on album right here. And it's going to load all of your clips that you currently have on the Osmo 360. So I'm going to pick one of these clips as an example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to download it. So if you click right here on this symbol right here, we're going to be able to download it. And you don't have to download it for editing. You can edit the files on this card and then you can export them at the end. If you have plenty of space, I recommend downloading it. I feel like it's going to edit a little bit better, but the one thing about the connection between this camera and your phone is it is really fast. You can see the progress bar up there. It does it at like almost 90 megabytes per second, not megabits, megabytes. And it's like already pretty much done with that one clip. So I'm gonna download a couple other clips here as well. And then we're gonna go here to videos. I'm gonna pick this one right here. So this one is a fairly lengthy clip. And if you wanna play the clip, just tap anywhere on the screen and it's gonna start playing it. And then click again and it's going to pause it. If you wanna look around in your clip, you're just gonna hold on the screen and toggle around. And down here, if you want to trim it, you can click trim and you're going to tap this to start the trim point. And then you can drag the timeline. So whatever is highlighted in red is going to be what you keep in your clip, and anything not highlighted is going to be what you lose. And then of course, tracking. Tracking is one of my favorite options here to use when editing. So if you click on tracking, you're then going to be able to draw a frame around the subject you want tracked. So in this case, let's track me. And then when you click start tracking, this is going to go through your entire clip and it's going to track whoever or whatever you tell it to track. So right there, it's gonna keep me nicely centered in the frame and I won't have it go for this entire 5-minute and 45-second clip. I'm gonna click stop tracking. But then if you play it back, wherever it's highlighted in green is where you have been tracked in the clip. And as you can see that, it keeps me nicely centered there. It looks really good. And then what we also can do, I'm gonna pause this, what I wanna mention is up here at the top where it says 9:16, that is for the aspect ratio. So you can of course export this as vertical video and that's fine. But if you want to keep it 16:9, just click on that and it's going to reframe it as 16:9. But the good thing, if you look back to where we already tracked, it doesn't cut off my head or anything like that. It does keep me in frame with the tracking. And then you can do 1:1, you can do 4:3, and you can do 3:4. So basically you can frame your clip for any platform. And I'm going to go back to 9:16 because if you're editing on a mobile device, in general, you're probably going to be editing for that vertical video platform like you would use on YouTube Shorts, something like that. So let's go a little further in this clip. Let's drag this way. You can drag in the timeline back and forth. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to do a manual keyframe. So for a manual keyframe, you just click that diamond shape right there, click on the plus, and you can frame it however you want to. So let's say for this keyframe, I'm going to have it looking in front of me. After you framed it, just start it playing, going forward, and you can drag as well. And it's going to keep that same framing until you want to change the perspective. So if you want to change the perspective again, click it again and then drag it around. So let's say I want it to look up at that point. So what you can do at this point is if you go back to here where I started the first keyframe, it's going to smoothly pan. And what it's going to do is at that point, it's then going to gradually pan up. So as I go along here, it's going to look more and more upward as we go along. And then once it gets to that next keyframe, it's going to stay at this perspective until I change it again. So I'm going to stop it right there, and we're going to put it back to the normal perspective. And one other thing to note, when you add a keyframe, you also can select your framing over here. So you can select what lens width you have. So if you want to do that if you want to do that astro effect where you have like the tiny world, you can do that. And you can select your framing, and then you can have it show that effect. And then you also can do the ultra wide framing, which is that right there. You can do the wide, you can do the de-warp with no distortion at all, which is a very cool effect to use, the de-warp. That one is going to give you everything nice and straight, and you're not going to have any of that fisheye effect. I will say what I generally prefer is I do prefer the de-warp, or I prefer the wide. The wide has a little bit of distortion, but I like the wide because it's a little bit wider frame. I use that for a lot of these clips on a hike Wide is kind of my favorite. Ultra wide, you get into quite a bit of distortion, but wide I feel like still looks pretty good. And then of course you also have the gyro frame option, and the gyro frame is where you can tap this to start framing and you can move it around. And then if you click stop, if you go back to play that clip, you can start play. And what it's going to do is it's going to record however you trace it, just like that. And then of course, if you'd like to do filters here, you can do a whole bunch of different special filters with different effects for your footage. So I recommend to play around with those a little bit, see if there's anything you like. You also can manually adjust it. You can do exposure, brightness, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, temperature, tint, saturation, etc. You can adjust it a lot. And there are glamour effects as well. And then color recovery, with this clip, I filmed it in D-Log-M. So if you click on that, it's going to enable that color recovery. It's going to basically apply the LUT. So if I have it off, things look a little bit washed out. So if you film in D-Log-M, I highly recommend doing the color recovery. It's going to look really good. And then you also can add music. So DJI has an entire music library. You can have that music in the background. But once you've keyed in everything, what you can do at that point is go up here where it says 1080p and you can export. And I recommend exporting in 4K because 4K is going to really give you that highest quality footage and it's going to look really good. And then for bitrate, I recommend going to higher. You want the highest bitrate possible. That also is going to look good. And then select 10-bit color depth. You really want to take advantage of that. It is going to give you the very best looking footage. If you want to apply noise reduction here, like if you were in low light and you had a high ISO, you might want to do that. In my case, I didn't really have noise issues because it was in the daylight. And for most of these clips in the woods, I wasn't in a lot of shade. And this camera does have that 1-inch sensor, which really does well in this type of environment. So I am not going to select the noise reduction, but if you do, just note that enabling that is going to increase your export time. So once you're ready to export, what you do right here, go ahead and click export, and it is going to tell you to stay on the current screen, and it's going to export the video clip. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna swing around to the computer here, and I'm going to show you how to edit clips using the DJI Studio app. All right, so you wanna make sure you have the DJI Studio app installed on here. And what you wanna do with that is you want to then connect your Osmo 360 to your computer. So the easiest way to do that is to open this port right here and plug in your USB-C cable. So I'm gonna plug that in right here, and we're gonna click File Transfer on the camera screen. And then once you do that, it's going to show it connected here, and it's going to show all your clips on here. So you've got a couple options at this point. You can select as many clips as you want, and then you can click download. But I have already taken the time to download them onto here. So I'm gonna go back here to the home window. And what you wanna do here is you wanna do create a project, and then you can give that project a name. And right now it's gonna be empty with the files, but you can import files. But I have downloaded them locally, and I'm going to go back to that project. And we're gonna take a look at a couple clips here. What you wanna do first of all is you can click the plus here and it's gonna add it to your timeline. So what you can do is you can edit one clip at a time, or you can just keep clicking plus and it's going to keep adding these. But what it's going to do when you add clips, as long as you put the cursor at the end of the clip, it's going to keep adding after that clip. If you don't move the sliding bar, it's going to add each clip you start clicking to the front end of it. So that is important to note. If you want to delete any clips, just click delete. It'll remove them from your timeline. So what you can do is you can edit a bunch at once like that, and you can just go through them all and then export them all, or you can export them one at a time. It's really up to you. I'm going to just do one clip right now just to show you the basics of this. So what you can do with your clip is you can, first of all, if there's any of your clip you want to delete, you can click this right here and it's going to cut to the left. It'll delete everything to the left of where you're selected. And then of course, if you get to a certain point and you want to delete everything to the right, you can select cut right. It'll get rid of it all there as well. Alternatively, you can also split the file. If you go right here, click split, and it's going to divide it into 2 files. And then if at any point you want to go forward and redo an action or go back and undo, you can just click these right here. And then keyframes. Keyframes are very important. They're probably going to be one of the crucial components of your editing. So if you want to set a keyframe, you're just going to click this right here. And then you can select your framing for this part of it. So I'm going to have it frame right here. And then up here, you can select the perspective. So you can do the asteroid perspective, you can do ultra wide, you can do wide, and you can do dewarp. So I'm going to stick with wide. Wide is my favorite for this. It's going to show you all your field of view, correction angle, everything here. You can manually adjust this as well, by the way. So if you want it zoomed out further, you can do that. That of course is going to get crazy distorted. You can zoom it in as well. And then correction angle, you can select that as well. So it's pretty cool how much you can adjust here. You can really customize it exactly as you want it. Even the roll angle if you want stuff to tilt. And you can reset everything by clicking the arrow right there to clear the frame data of the selected clip. And I'm going to go back to wide and I'm going to frame this right here. And then
let's get our packs back.
You can start it playing, and you of course can drag ahead in the clip too if you want to stick with the same framing for a while. You can go forward. And then of course, one of the things that I use most often when editing with the app, with the DJI Studio, is I use this intelligent tracking option. And let's say I want to track my son right here. You click it, you click start tracking, and it is going to track whatever subject you select, and it's just going to stick with them. And I really like this intelligent tracking. If you wanted to keep a human in the frame, it really does a great job with that. And this was a good frame to choose that because my son was probably arguably doing the most in this frame. He was the one getting his pack on. Of course, my other son was as well. So what we can do is we can end tracking and we can look at how it did with the tracking here. It did great. But then let's say I want to track my other son. So get beyond the green part here, and then you can toggle around and you can select a new object to track. Select it right here. We're going to highlight him and we're going to click start tracking, and then it's going to track my other son as well as he gets ready. And then it's still going to follow him around. I of course got in the way, but it's still tracking him, and the tracking is going to continue as they move off down the trail. And then when you want to edit the image, go over here to image. Make sure Rocksteady is selected. You obviously want your clip stabilized. You can select direction lock as well, but make sure to do that before you set your keyframes because it's going to go and wipe out stuff. It's going to change the alignment. I really don't use direction lock. I like to just do keyframes and intelligent tracking, but if you want to do it, you can do so. If you do have lens protectors on, make sure to select the transparent lens protectors, and then chromatic aberration control. I like to just keep this selected. That's going to be a good default option. For your audio, I recommend just keeping that 100%. You want to have your audio, the volume that it came out of the camera in general. And then up here, this is really important. If you use D-Log-M like I did, you want to do color recovery on your clip. It's going to really change how it looks. Let me get back here. So D-Log-M, everything looks washed out right now. When I click color recovery, watch what happens here. It brings back all those colors. It looks really good. Alternatively, if you want to not have the color recovery here and you want to add the colors and fine tune in a video editor, you can do that as well. And then you also can adjust the exposure, the luminance. You can do a whole bunch of stuff here manually if you want to do so. And then you also can adjust temperature, tint, saturation, vibrant, sharpness, and you can add some vignetting if you want to. So if you want to get really artistic there, there's a lot you can do. And then finally the speed, if you want to speed stuff up, you can do that. Or if you want to slow it down, you can do that as well. And then when you're ready to export, what you want to do is you want to go up here to export and you want to give your file a name. So I'm going to name it video 1, and then you want to set your resolution to 4K. I always recommend exporting as 4K, unless of course you filmed in a lower resolution, which I don't recommend. 4K looks really good. And then frame rate, I recommend keeping the frame rate you captured it in. In my case, it was 30 frames per second. But for bitrate, I recommend going down to custom. I believe by default, it's going to start off as recommended, but I recommend going to custom. And I like to drag this all the way to 160. The only reason you may not want to do this is if you have a massive project. You could do the recommended, but what I recommend doing is I recommend exporting that clip with the recommended. Then I recommend going back and exporting it a second time with custom at 160 so that you can see how much of a difference there is in quality. The quality difference may not matter to you. You might be happy with it, but I recommend doing that just to make sure it's good with you. The custom at 160 is going to be a file size about 3 times larger than the recommended, so do keep that in mind. 10-bit color, make sure that's selected. You want to export in 10-bit. It's going to look much better than the 8-bit. You're going to have those 1 billion possible color shades instead of 16 million, which you find with 8-bit. And then if you have any noise reduction needs, just make sure to select that. This would be especially applicable if you were filming in low light, and then you're going to hit export at that point, and it's going to proceed to export. So it's going to be the same operation if you wanted to add multiple clips here. You can do that before exporting. And then up here, if you want to add any music, that's where you can select from a whole bunch of different options. You can add custom filters here as well. You can do a lot of things. What I use this for is I usually use this just to reframe my clips, and then I take them over into Premiere Pro and I finish editing there. But you don't have to do that. The good thing is if you want to edit these clips in here, you can do that. You can make a whole production here, a whole finished video file right in the DJI Studio app. You can add music, you can export it, and you can upload it. So you don't have to do the multiple step editing like I do. So that is how you use the DJI Studio for editing. Yeah, I just love this part of the trail. You guys like this part of the trail? Yeah. All the moss along here. It's slightly uphill, but it's very pleasant walking along here today.